The classroom fell silent the instant the speakers awakened. A faint electrical hum rippled through the circular lecture hall, vibrating beneath transparent desks and polished alloy floors until even the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Hundreds of cadets from dozens of worlds sat beneath the glowing dome of the Galactic Survival Academy, a place where future explorers, diplomats, and military officers learned one brutal lesson before all others: in the galaxy, hesitation meant extinction. Towering holographic displays cast cold blue light across rows of unfamiliar faces, scaled, feathered, crystalline, insectoid, and aquatic beings housed within floating life support spheres. Conversations died mid-sentence. Antennae stiffened. Sensitive ears folded flat. Multi-layered eyes widened in anticipation. Then, without warning, the recording began. A single, impossibly deep growl rolled through the chamber. It wasn't merely heard. It was felt. The sound crawled through the metal walls, vibrated inside rib cages, and settled into every instinct evolution had ever written. It carried the weight of hunger. Of patience. Of something that had stalked living prey long before civilizations had learned to build cities among the stars. The low rumble was followed by the crunch of heavy footsteps moving across dense undergrowth. Branches snapped. Leaves rustled. A slow inhale echoed through unseen lungs large enough to shake the microphones recording them. Then came another sound, a wet, guttural click unlike any language, a predator testing the air moments before striking. Several cadets recoiled instinctively. One avian student's feathers exploded outward in panic. A six-limbed reptilian clenched every claw against the edge of the desk hard enough to leave grooves in the alloy surface. Near the back of the room, an aquatic delegate instinctively flooded its breathing tank with calming enzymes. No one spoke. No one dared. The recording continued, each passing second somehow more unsettling than the last. Massive jaws slammed shut with a deafening crack that echoed throughout the chamber. Distant screams, whether animal or intelligent life, were impossible to identify before they were swallowed by silence. Wind howled through towering trees. Something enormous moved just beyond sight, never revealing itself completely, allowing imagination to become far more terrifying than certainty. The academy instructor stood motionless beneath the holographic projection, allowing the fear to spread naturally. She had used this recording for decades. Entire graduating classes remembered it long after forgetting everything else. Across known space, this audio file had become legendary. It was extracted from a classified expedition that had lost 17 elite xenobiologists before transmitting its final distress signal. The species responsible remained uncaptured, unnamed, and largely unexplored. Military analysts ranked its vocalizations among the most psychologically destabilizing sounds ever documented. Finally, the speakers fell silent. The absence of noise somehow felt louder than the recording itself. The instructor slowly stepped forward, her voice calm enough to cut through the lingering tension. "Cadets," she said, her words echoing beneath the towering dome, "you have just listened to the hunting call of one of the deadliest apex predators ever discovered in explored space." The sentence settled over the room like ice. Every student knew what came next. Survival analysis. Threat assessment. Evacuation probability. Yet before anyone could begin discussing tactics, nearly every eye in the chamber drifted toward the same place. The lone human. Cadet Ethan Walker sat near the center of the classroom, arms loosely folded, his expression illuminated by the fading holograms. Unlike everyone else, he hadn't flinched. His pulse hadn't visibly quickened. There was no fear in his eyes, only quiet curiosity, as if he were trying to remember where he had heard something similar before. For several long seconds, he simply listened to the silence left behind. Then the corner of his mouth lifted into the faintest smirk. He leaned back comfortably in his chair, glanced around at the terrified faces surrounding him, and in a voice barely louder than a whisper, said, "That's just a house. The Galactic Survival Academy drifted in permanent orbit above the swirling blue atmosphere of Nereth, 6, a colossal gas giant whose endless storms glowed with ribbons of electric sapphire and violet. From the station's panoramic observation decks, cadets could watch lightning storms stretch for thousands of kilometers beneath them like veins of living energy, reminding every student that nature, whether on one world or 1,000, never surrendered quietly. The Academy itself was considered the safest educational institution in Alliance territory, yet every corridor, lecture hall, and combat simulator existed for one purpose: preparing future explorers to survive a galaxy where beauty and death often shared the same horizon. More than 200 intelligent civilizations sent their brightest minds here. Each species arrived carrying generations of hard-earned survival instincts. Some had evolved beneath crushing oceans, others inside poisonous atmospheres or frozen wastelands where sunlight appeared only once every few years. Every cadet believed their homeworld had forged the toughest people in the galaxy. Every orientation cycle began with the same unspoken competition. Whose world had been the harshest? Among this extraordinary collection of alien prodigies walked one quiet human. Cadet Ethan Walker. He wasn't physically imposing compared to the towering gravity-born giants from Kelver Prime. He wasn't telepathic like the silver-eyed Lyrans or gifted with the lightning-fast reflexes of the insectoid Vexari. In almost every measurable category used by the Academy's entrance exams, humanity ranked comfortably in the middle. Average endurance. Average strength. Average intelligence by galactic standards. Yet Ethan carried something the instructors couldn't quantify. Perspective. During lectures describing catastrophic ecosystems, he often found himself suppressing a smile. Lessons about carnivorous wildlife reminded him of camping trips with his father deep in North America's forests. Hazardous weather modules sounded strangely familiar after growing up where tornado sirens interrupted family dinners and hurricanes appeared on the evening news every summer. Even quarantine drills felt routine compared to Earth's long history of epidemics that humanity had endured, adapted to, and eventually overcome. He rarely spoke about it. There was never any reason to. The other cadets already viewed humans as fascinating newcomers. Only 3 standard years had passed since Earth officially joined the Galactic Alliance, ending centuries of isolation after humanity's first successful faster-than-light contact mission. Across the Academy, humans were still something of a mystery. Their diplomatic records described them as unusually cooperative. Military assessments labeled them dangerously creative under pressure. Medical reports noted astonishing resilience despite fragile-looking physiology. Psychological evaluations repeatedly failed to explain why humans consistently volunteered for missions considered excessively dangerous by every other species. Rumors spread faster than official reports. Some cadets whispered that humans possessed hidden combat instincts. Others insisted Earth's gravity secretly produced unstoppable warriors. A few believed the newcomers deliberately exaggerated stories about their homeworld to intimidate potential rivals. Ethan never corrected any of them. If anything, he found the misconceptions amusing. Because the truth sounded even less believable. To the galaxy, Earth appeared almost idyllic from orbit, a blue-and-green paradise overflowing with liquid water, breathable air, and staggering biodiversity. Recruitment posters often displayed peaceful coastlines, snow-covered mountains, forests glowing beneath golden sunsets, and children laughing beneath clear skies. The brochures never mentioned what lurked inside those forests. Or beneath those oceans. Or hiding beneath ordinary rocks. They never showed lightning igniting entire mountain ranges, earthquakes swallowing cities, invisible microbes reshaping civilizations, or storms powerful enough to erase coastlines overnight. They certainly never explained that humans willingly built homes in places where nature regularly reminded them who truly ruled the planet. To Ethan, none of it seemed extraordinary. It was simply home. As he sat among classmates fascinated by creatures they considered unimaginably deadly, he quietly realized something that made him both proud and strangely lonely. Everyone in this academy had survived the worst their worlds could offer. Humanity had simply stopped noticing theirs. And that difference, though invisible now, was about to change everything. The instructor allowed the silence to linger before raising a single hand. At once, the towering holographic projectors surrounding the lecture hall awakened, flooding the chamber with shifting walls of emerald light. The polished floor dissolved beneath the cadets' feet, replaced by the illusion of a dense alien rainforest stretching endlessly in every direction. Humidity seemed to rise from invisible soil as environmental emitters released damp air scented with moss, wet bark, and unfamiliar vegetation. Tiny particles floated through shafts of artificial sunlight, while distant insect-like chirps echoed from somewhere deep within the simulated wilderness. It was no ordinary classroom demonstration. The Galactic Survival Academy's combat simulations were famous for reproducing ecosystems with terrifying precision, down to the vibration of every footstep and the pressure changes before an attack. Within seconds, every cadet felt as though they had been transported to the surface of a death world. Then the forest moved. Not the trees. Something inside them. A massive silhouette slipped between trunks wider than starship engines, disappearing almost as quickly as it appeared. Heavy footsteps reverberated through the ground with deliberate rhythm, slow enough to suggest confidence, heavy enough to shake loose leaves from towering branches overhead. Every instinct in the room screamed the same warning. Something was hunting. The instructors intentionally withheld visual confirmation. Fear was always stronger when imagination filled the gaps. Branches cracked somewhere behind the students. A low growl rolled through the simulated jungle, impossibly close this time, carrying vibrations that reached into the chest before they reached the ears. One nervous cadet from the ocean world of Thalassa instinctively backed away until he collided with his desk. Another activated the emergency calming implant hidden beneath her collar without realizing she'd done so. Across the chamber, feathers, scales, antennae, and sensory tendrils all reacted according to millions of years of evolutionary programming. Predators. Run. Hide. Survive. Suddenly, the creature burst into view. Towering nearly 6 meters tall, its body rippled beneath layers of armored muscle. Bone-like plates covered its shoulders while rows of hooked claws tore effortlessly through tree trunks as it charged. Twin jaws unfolded in impossible directions, revealing concentric rings of serrated teeth glistening beneath strands of saliva. Four amber eyes scanned the forest independently, locking onto movement with horrifying precision. Before anyone could fully process its appearance, the beast lunged. A holographic herbivore the size of a transport shuttle attempted to flee, but the predator closed the distance in seconds. The impact shook the simulation. Branches exploded into splinters. One violent snap echoed through the forest, followed by silence. The lesson was unmistakable. There was no outrunning this thing. The simulation reset. The instructor calmly faced the class as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Survival analysis, she announced. One by one, cadets offered textbook responses. Seek elevated terrain. Deploy thermal camouflage. Retreat toward water. Remain perfectly motionless. Broadcast distress beacons immediately. Each answer earned a thoughtful nod, yet none sounded convincing. Deep down, everyone understood the uncomfortable truth. Against a creature evolved to dominate its ecosystem, survival often depended less on intelligence than luck. Finally, the instructor's gaze settled on the lone human. Cadet Ethan Walker. The room followed her eyes. Even those still recovering from the simulation turned to face him. You come from another classified death world, she continued evenly. If multiple predators of comparable capability surrounded a human settlement, what would your species do? The question seemed perfectly reasonable. To everyone except Ethan. He blinked once. Twice. His brow furrowed, not in fear, but in genuine confusion. He glanced back at the frozen image of the monstrous predator towering above the forest canopy, then around at dozens of anxious faces waiting for his answer. For a moment, he wondered if this was some kind of trick question. His mind drifted unexpectedly to quiet evenings back on Earth, to barking dogs behind backyard fences, motion-activated porch lights flickering on, neighbors mowing lawns on Saturday mornings, and children riding bicycles while distant thunder rolled across the horizon. Slowly, almost apologetically, Ethan looked back at the instructor. "I'm not sure I understand the question," he admitted. The room fell into complete silence once again. Because no one realized that the human wasn't underestimating the predator. He simply couldn't understand why anyone would abandon their home because dangerous things lived nearby. A ripple of quiet laughter spread through the lecture hall. Some cadets assumed the human was joking. Others exchanged puzzled glances, convinced the translator had failed to capture the meaning of his response. Even the instructor, a veteran survival expert who had spent decades studying the galaxy's deadliest ecosystems, narrowed her eyes with cautious curiosity. Ethan didn't look arrogant. He didn't look frightened either. He simply appeared confused. After a thoughtful pause, he slowly raised his hand. "Permission to present a comparative environmental recording from Earth, instructor." The room fell silent again. The request itself was unusual. Academy protocol rarely allowed students to interrupt official survival demonstrations, especially during a classified lecture. Yet something in Ethan's calm expression suggested absolute confidence, not the reckless confidence of someone eager to prove themselves, but the quiet certainty of someone who knew the conversation was missing an important piece. The instructor studied him for several long seconds before giving a slow nod. Permission granted. Without another word, Ethan stepped toward the central holographic console. His fingers moved effortlessly across the glowing interface until a small file appeared on the display. Earth, Residential District, Night. Several cadets exchanged amused looks. Residential? Surely the human had selected the wrong recording. The projection activated. Darkness filled the chamber. Then came the first sound. A dog barked somewhere beyond an unseen fence. Not once. Again. Louder this time. Another answered from farther away, followed by a chorus of barking echoing through the neighborhood. Before the class could process it, metal chains rattled violently as something lunged against a gate. Wind rushed between trees, carrying the dry rustle of leaves scraping rooftops. A wooden fence creaked under invisible pressure while rain began tapping rhythmically against glass windows. It sounded ordinary. Then more layers emerged. The distant rumble of thunder rolled across the sky, low and endless. Somewhere nearby, an owl released a haunting call into the darkness. Shrill insects buzzed from every direction, creating an almost hypnotic wall of sound. Suddenly, from far beyond the houses, came the chilling yips and howls of coyotes communicating across open fields. Several cadets stiffened. The predators weren't close. But they were close enough. The recording continued. A deep, guttural growl echoed from somewhere outside the microphone's range. Then came the unmistakable sound of heavy breathing. Branches cracked. Something large moved through nearby woods. Moments later, frantic barking erupted from every dog in the neighborhood. No alarms. No evacuation. No screaming civilians. Instead, a porch light clicked on. Another followed. A distant voice casually shouted, "Hey! Get out of here!" Metal garbage cans crashed onto pavement. The unseen animal retreated into the darkness. The recording didn't end. A lawn sprinkler suddenly hissed to life. Somewhere inside one of the houses, laughter drifted through an open window. A television played softly in the background. Wind chimes danced in the breeze while a child giggled before someone gently closed the front door. Life simply continued. The classroom sat frozen. Every instinct the simulation had awakened moments earlier now collided with something they couldn't comprehend. The sounds weren't from a military outpost. They weren't from an armed research colony. They weren't survival specialists living inside fortified bunkers. These were civilians. Families. Ordinary people. Living peacefully in the middle of an ecosystem where dangerous predators wandered close enough to trigger barking dogs on a routine evening. The instructor quietly replayed the final 30 seconds. Again. Again. Each time, the conclusion remained the same. No panic. No emergency response. Just neighbors carrying on with their night. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "That's a fairly average suburban neighborhood," he said with an almost embarrassed shrug. "Nothing unusual, really." He glanced around the room, realizing from the expression staring back at him that what every human considered background noise had become something else entirely. To these cadets, it sounded less like a neighborhood. And more like a civilization calmly existing inside the territory of monsters. For the first time since humanity joined the Galactic Alliance, the classroom wasn't questioning whether humans understood danger. They were beginning to wonder what kind of world could make those sounds feel normal. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything the Predator simulation had created. No one reached for a datapad. No one whispered to a classmate. Even the environmental system seemed quieter, as if the station itself were waiting to hear what the human would say next. Ethan looked around the lecture hall, noticing the disbelief written across dozens of alien faces. He hadn't intended to shock anyone. To him, the recording had simply been home. But now he understood that the galaxy saw Earth through the lens of paradise, blue oceans, green forests, gentle skies, and had never truly understood what survived beneath that beauty. Taking a slow breath, he reached toward the holographic console one last time. "Maybe pictures explain it better," he said softly. The room darkened. The first image appeared. A wolf pack moved silently through snow-covered forests, their amber eyes glowing beneath the moonlight as they coordinated with effortless precision. Before anyone could study them, the scene shifted. A saltwater crocodile exploded from a muddy riverbank with terrifying speed, jaws snapping shut where prey had stood only moments before. Then came great white sharks cutting through dark ocean water with cold efficiency, followed by venomous snakes whose single bite could stop a heart in minutes. Giant bears towered onto their hind legs. Mountain lions vanished into rocky cliffs so perfectly that only their glowing eyes betrayed their presence. Swarms of insects filled entire skies. Tiny spiders no larger than a fingertip carried venom capable of killing creatures hundreds of times their size. Gasps echoed throughout the chamber. These weren't military bioweapons. They were wildlife. The images accelerated. Towering tornadoes carved black scars across open plains. Hurricanes swallowed coastlines beneath walls of water. Lightning ignited forests stretching beyond the horizon. Earthquakes shattered highways and cities alike, while volcanoes painted entire skies crimson beneath rivers of molten rock. The holograms showed floods consuming neighborhoods, avalanches burying mountainsides, and deserts where a single mistake meant death beneath an unforgiving sun. The instructor stared without speaking. Every survival scenario the Academy taught as extraordinary. Humanity called history. Then the presentation changed again. Instead of disasters, it showed people. Firefighters racing toward burning buildings while everyone else fled. Rescue workers pulling strangers from collapsed rubble. Doctors fighting invisible diseases through endless nights. Scientists studying dangerous pathogens instead of hiding from them. Farmers planting crops after floods had destroyed the previous harvest. Engineers rebuilding bridges before the smoke had even cleared. Children laughing beneath storm shelters. Families returning to homes after hurricanes. City skylines rising stronger after earthquakes. Humanity wasn't merely surviving. It was refusing to surrender. Ethan finally stepped away from the console and faced the class. His voice remained calm, almost reflective. "We're not fearless." The words echoed gently through the silent lecture hall. "We're scared all the time." He looked briefly toward the projection of Earth's swirling blue oceans before continuing. "The difference is, fear stopped being a reason to quit." He folded his hands behind his back. Every generation inherited dangers they didn't choose. Predators. Storms. Disease. Famine. War. We couldn't wait for the world to become safe. His eyes met those of every stunned cadet. So we learned to make homes anyway. The realization spread through the room like dawn breaking over a dark horizon. Humanity had never conquered Earth. Earth had simply never succeeded in breaking humanity. For the first time since the lecture began, the terrifying predator recording from earlier seemed strangely insignificant. Compared to a civilization that willingly built cities between fault lines, crossed oceans filled with monsters, climbed frozen mountains, explored radioactive wastelands, and kept reaching toward the stars despite countless disasters, one alien beast was merely another obstacle waiting to be understood. No cheers followed. No dramatic applause. Only profound silence. Because every cadet present had just witnessed something far more intimidating than physical strength. They had discovered the true reason humanity had earned its place among the stars. Not because humans came from the safest world. But because they came from one that never promised they would survive, and they chose to build a future there anyway. The lecture concluded without ceremony. No dismissal chime seemed loud enough to break the silence that had settled over the Galactic Survival Academy. One by one, the cadets rose from their seats, yet none hurried toward the exits as they normally did after class. Conversations that usually filled the circular chamber with dozens of alien languages never began. Instead, students lingered in thoughtful stillness, glancing once more at the now dark holographic projector where Earth's ordinary suburban recording had played only minutes before. The Predator simulation that had terrified generations of cadets had quietly disappeared from the display, its fearsome reputation forever diminished, not because it had become less dangerous, but because everyone now understood that humanity had spent thousands of years living alongside countless threats without ever considering them extraordinary. Groups slowly formed throughout the hall. A reptilian cadet replayed the Earth audio through his personal translator, listening again to barking dogs, distant thunder, creaking fences, and the soft laughter drifting from a family home. This time, he didn't hear background noise. He heard courage disguised as routine. Nearby, an avian student watched the footage of children riding bicycles while coyotes howled somewhere beyond the neighborhood. Her feathers lowered in disbelief. On her homeworld, entire cities would have been evacuated if apex predators approached civilian settlements. On Earth, someone simply switched on a porch light and shouted into the darkness. That realization unsettled her more than any monster ever could. Even the instructors remained behind after the class had technically ended. Veteran survival specialists quietly exchanged data through glowing wrist consoles, comparing decades of academy records against everything they had just witnessed. One professor finally deactivated the archived Predator recording and removed it from the Academy's list of psychological endurance assessments. It no longer serves its intended purpose, he admitted. No one argued. Fear, after all, was relative. And the galaxy had just discovered that humanity's definition of normal existed on an entirely different scale. Ethan slipped unnoticed from the lecture hall while the discussions continued behind him. The station's long observation corridor stretched ahead in peaceful silence, its transparent walls revealing the endless stars beyond. Far below, the immense atmosphere of Nerith 6 shimmered with ribbons of blue lightning dancing across swirling clouds. It was breathtaking, beautiful in the same dangerous way every untamed world seemed to be. He rested one hand against the cool glass. For the first time that day, the memories came quietly. Rain tapping against his childhood bedroom window. The rhythmic creak of old wooden floors inside his family's house. The comforting bark of the neighbor's dog somewhere across the street. Summer evenings filled with buzzing insects. Autumn winds rattling loose branches against the roof. Thunder rolling across distant hills while the lights flickered for only a moment before returning. His mother calling everyone inside before the storm grew worse. None of those memories had ever felt remarkable. They were simply pieces of home. Yet somewhere behind him, inside a classroom filled with beings from 200 different civilizations, those same sounds had become evidence of a world almost impossible to comprehend. Ethan smiled faintly. Not out of pride. Out of gratitude. Earth had never been gentle. It had demanded resilience before comfort, adaptation before certainty, and courage before reward. It had raised generations who learned that danger wasn't always something to defeat, it was often something to respect, prepare for, and continue living beside. Humanity hadn't become extraordinary because it had escaped hardship. It had become extraordinary because it refused to let hardship define its future. Behind the observation glass, the stars stretched endlessly into the darkness, waiting for the next generation of explorers to cross them. Somewhere out there, new predators waited. New disasters. New impossible frontiers. Humanity would meet them the same way it always had. With curiosity stronger than fear. With determination stronger than despair. And with the quiet confidence of people who had already graduated from the oldest survival school in the universe. A small blue planet called Earth. Because to the rest of the galaxy, it was a death world. But to humanity, it was just home.